So, today I would like to start the teachings of this year with something that is quite simple, but at the same time, I suppose very important. Is our understanding of where do we belong somehow, which is understanding of the lineage and the tradition that we belong to. In the different contexts, even in a more mundane context, not related to the Dharma, it is important for us to understand where we come from, which is the culture where we grew up, which is the family, our own family. Nowadays less and less, but if we look in our own reality culture, always which is the family, what our grandparents and great-grandparents did, and so on, it does have an impact on us. There is also an importance also on the background, okay? There are different levels on which we could talk about this. Even though nowadays, mostly we do not give so much importance to it, some of us more, some of us less. In the spiritual path, it actually has a very big importance. In the spiritual path, actually, which is our lineage, and knowing the lineage, and which is the transmission and the tradition of which we make part, actually there is a very big importance on it. And so I would like today just to start telling a little bit, very briefly, what is our lineage, our tradition, understanding a little bit the difference between lineage and tradition also. Okay? If we would do this in a very extensive way, we call Lamring Gyube Namdar. Lamring Gyube Namdar is like the life stories of the lineage gurus of the gradual path to enlightenment, which is of the Lamring, where you take every one of the masters that have, through whom the teachings have arrived to us, and then we go to read and to explain the life story of each one of them, up to Buddha. That's a very beautiful thing to do, but it's a bit extensive. And we would need to take the books and go through it. They exist. It's possible to read them, but it would be a bit long. That's not the moment for that. So at least let's try to understand first what is a lineage, what is a tradition, what it means for something to be traditional, and where we are part of. Okay? First of all, there is one important thing that we need to understand, which is what is the difference between a tradition and a lineage. So let's first understand what do we mean by tradition. Okay. Tradition, basically, making it simple, it's a set of beliefs, of teachings, and of techniques, methods for reaching and transforming that mind into that set of teachings, which is basically within a tradition there is a paradigm that is being transmitted. And then there is the methods how to reach that paradigm. Okay. So if we look, for example, if every religion have different aspects, so have different sets of beliefs, different sets of basically have a different worldview. And then there is all the teachings to explain that worldview and how to develop that worldview, all the methods and explanations and teachings, how to develop oneself within that worldview. Okay. So within Buddhism, we have normally three main divisions, which is the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. But let's talk a little bit now about the Mahayana. Within the Mahayana itself, if we look, there are, even before that, within all the three, there are some basic fundamental concepts and basic fundamental teachings, which are always the same. We take the Four Noble Truths. You can go to every tradition of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths will always be there. You can take the Three Jewels, will always be there. You can take the concept of bodhicitta, will be there in every Mahayana tradition. You can take the concept of emptiness and so on. There are many things that are very, very fundamental. So there's, let's say, some core beliefs, there are some core aspects of the philosophy And then there are all other sorts of explanations and worldviews that help to bring the person, the practitioner, to reach the main objective, which in the Mahayana tradition is to reach the state of Buddha, which means to develop one's own qualities at their maximum potential, eliminate one's own defilements completely, in order to help others. That's the main goal. But then what happens is that we have different people of different culture, with different mentality. And each one of us, we need very often a different approach in order to reach the same result. Okay? So why do we have so many traditions? Basically because we are different. Even from the time of Buddha himself, what happened? Buddha would give different teachings in different places to reach the same result. So what happened is that when Buddha passed away, after some time, the disciples gathered. And from that first gathering, it came out 4 different traditions, of which the first tradition was divided into 18 parts, 18 different traditions. Why? Because it were 18 different places where Buddha gave the same teaching. And they were but slightly different, which is, for example, related to the monastic vows. The monastic vows are not the same everywhere where Buddha taught. So in one context, for example, there was one town where Buddha gave all the monastic vows and created a monastic community. But he gave the vow, which was in the system, that was you take the vow once in your life and it's for your whole life. So once you take the monastic vows, it's forever, or for all this life, and if you break them, you cannot take them back again. Then there was another place where Buddha gave the same teachings, more or less, but in that case he said the vows, the monastic vows, you can take them for a specific period of time. You can take the vows for a year, you can take the vows for 6 months, you can take the vows for a specific period of time. So, 2 very different things. In one case he said, or once and for whole lifetime, or nothing. In the other case he said you can take them for a specific period of time. Why this difference? Because each one of them were in a different context culturally, mentally. So the mentality was different, the culture was different, the needs were different. So tradition always had to have this aspect of adapting to the mentality of the place. And where were the traditions, new traditions born, basically? When there was a big cultural difference. So when we have Buddhism from India going to Tibet, it adapted to the Tibetan reality, Tibetan culture and mentality. When it went to China, it adapted to the Chinese mentality. When it went to Japan, it adapted to the Japanese mentality, and so on. So, for example, if we look the way how Buddha taught, how the Buddhist teachings were taught by Guru Padmasambhava in Tibet, and how they were taught later by Atisha, they were very different. But the main reason is because I am sure if Atisha would have gone in the time of Guru Padmasambhava and Guru Padmasambhava in the time of Atisha, they would be more similar, the teachings, to each other. Which means the cultural context was very different. So, if we look, for example, within Tibetan Buddhism, we have 4 main traditions, no? There is the Nyingma, the Kagyu, the Sakya, and the Gelug. And then there is also the Jonangpa, actually, which is another tradition that is in between there. But these are the most well-known traditions. So what happened was that the Nyingma tradition, which is the old tradition that is coming from Guru Padmasambhava, when Guru Padmasambhava arrived in Tibet, the Burn religion was very strong, which is the original animist religion of Tibet. So what happened is that many aspects of the tradition were adapted to the local religion and to the local culture. It's like, if we make a comparison, it's similar when we look to the Christian tradition in the Western world. Many things that we do now are actually adaptations on top of the old pagan traditions, no? Like even whenever we have the Christmas time or many other things actually, which were actually pagan festivities and related to that culture, then it was adapted. Okay? And this we can see in every religion. This happened all the time. So that's why when Guru Padmasambhava arrived, the Burn tradition was very strong, so he adapted it. So when we have Tibetan New Year, what we do in the Tibetan New Year, etc., we do the prayers. Actually, they just took the tradition and they adapted with the Buddhist teaching practice inside. If you take the prayer flag is not something Buddhist originally. The prayer flags, they are beautiful, wonderful, and so on. They were originally Burn. It's something very strong connected to the Burn tradition. The Burn tradition, the Burn religion has a very strong connection with the elements and so on. So the flags actually have something to do with the pacification of the elements. And normally they used to do their own prayers. So what happened afterwards? The Buddhist masters, they took the same flags which people used to have, and they just changed the prayers inside. And they made them Buddhist. Okay? But it's a very strong part of the Burn tradition originally. Okay? And like this we can go on and on with many other examples. So one very important thing for us to understand is that tradition is not something static. A tradition must adapt to the times and to the culture in order for the teachings to be kept alive. Because what we can see in our own culture, what happens when a tradition does not adapt to the change of culture and times? It becomes obsolete. It arrives at a point where people cannot connect anymore to it. Like within the Christian tradition, there are parts of tradition which now many are adapting to the modern times. But there are many things, for example, that originally when they were made, they made real sense. But after 2, 3, 4 centuries, whatever, culture changes and then people are not able to connect to that anymore and it doesn't make any more sense. So there is the need of adaptation. And mainly when there is the need of adaptation in a tradition, when we need to make a new tradition, when there is a big cultural change, when there is a real big change of mentality, a big change of culture, that's when we need to adapt truly the teachings. Otherwise we lose them. Otherwise we are not able to connect anymore to the true meaning and we get blocked somewhere. So, we're not going to talk about this right now, but just as a reflection, the times in which we live now, the cultural context and the times in which we live, are them different from the context where these teachings that we received were originally given in Tibet or not? Very much different. Okay? So, tradition means adaptation. Tradition doesn't mean to remain fixed into something. Okay? This is one thing that it's important to understand. Keeping the essence, bringing the meaning, always being able to bring the people to the same path, but adapting to their mentality, adapting to their culture. Okay? So there is the way how the teachings are explained. Let's say the intention is always the same, is to generate love and wisdom within one's own mind. Is to generate bodhicitta, is to generate the correct view of reality. But how am I going to induce someone to develop love and wisdom? How am I going to guide someone to develop this love and wisdom? Love towards oneself, love towards others, correct view of reality. How am I going to induce that? Every cultural context is in a different way. It cannot be exactly the same way to everyone, in every cultural context, in every time where we go. There is this need of adaptation. Okay, this is part of tradition itself. Okay. One other thing also, before we enter into more other aspects, is that we nowadays, we live in a very special moment, actually. We are experiencing a very special moment. Because the context in which Rinpoche received the teachings and where he learned Buddhism, and the context in which he's teaching nowadays, is it the same? It's extremely different, actually. Even the context in which I receive the teachings and the way how I receive the teachings, it's very different from the context in which I am teaching. Like, if I would teach in the same way how I receive the teachings, most probably not many people will remain listening to it. You know? Just to make an example, there will be no course and program. We would make no program. I will just be there waiting for people to request for teachings. Secondly, there will be just if you come to me and you say, oh, well, I like to learn the 51 mental factors. Okay? First, you memorize all of them. Come with all of them memorized. Then let's see if I will teach you or not. And like this, we can go on and on. So, and also the difference is one big difference is that we have this idea in our modern culture that we need to understand things, and we don't like when we don't understand things. If something is explained to us and we really don't understand it, we feel stupid, and we don't like feeling stupid. So what we do, if something is explained to us and we cannot understand, we say that it's not valid, it's not good, it's not right, because I could not understand it sometimes. So what happened is that in the way how I learned, you go the first teachings, you understand 20%. The rest you don't understand, but slowly you will understand. No hurry for that, And maybe after 10 years you put the parts together and then you put things together. It's a whole different approach. No? It's an approach which has time related to it, in which take years and years and years to understand things, but then you understand them in a different way. Here we have a different approach. I need to explain something that normally would take time. We have no hurry to do on time, need to do in one weekend because people need to work. It's a complete different context. Okay? So, the beautiful thing is that we are living now exactly inside a moment of transaction from one tradition to another tradition. We're living exactly inside the moment in which one tradition has been kept alive, is being kept alive, and then it is adapting to the new needs that we have. And the only way for that to happen is there must be someone, at least one person, minimum, that have a deep understanding of one's own past tradition, and it has the whole ability to adapt it to the mentality of where he is. That's Rinpoche. And at the same time, whoever does this must have great courage also. Okay? Because it's not obvious to adapt to the new culture and so on. And it's much more easy just to continue repeating the same thing that I have received. I just repeat the same thing again. To adapt it, it's not obvious. It needs a lot of knowledge, it needs a lot of experience, and it needs courage also. And a lot of love and compassion also. So we have all this. And we are living exactly in this moment of transaction. And it's a very powerful moment, actually. Maybe in 50 years, it will be different, Rinpoche's tradition or the NgalSo tradition or Western Buddhism, whatever, will be quite well established. And then it will be another moment. Beautiful also, I hope, but another moment. And now we are exactly in between. And it's a very specific, a very powerful and very unique moment, actually, the one we are in. Okay? So, briefly, what do we mean by lineage? While the tradition is the set of beliefs, worldview and techniques and so on that we have, lineage is the line of transmission through which that teachings arrive to us, that system, that tradition arrive to us. Like within one same tradition, we can have different lineages. This is very common. When I was reading the commentary these last days, like of the teachings of Lojong that we were making, of mind transformation, there are different lineages of transmission of the same exact teachings. So which means one master gives the teachings to few disciples, that disciples give to other disciples, and like this we can have different lines of transmission of the same teachings. What makes a lineage to be a valid lineage? What makes a lineage to be alive? Making a metaphor, let's imagine that we want to have electricity. No? So we make our own, we put the wires correctly, we put the bulbs, we make everything to turn the light on. But what happened is that in order for me to have electricity, I need to connect to the light pole. That one light pole is connected to another light pole, and like this it goes back until it reaches the power source. Right? But what happened? Let's say the power source is perfectly. But in between me and the original power source, one light pole falls down. I have no electricity. Similar to that, in order for us to be able to gain the realizations, we must receive the teachings from within an uninterrupted lineage. Each master is like a light pole that is transmitting one from each other. And each one must be able to keep it alive purely in order to be able to transmit to the next one. So, basically, in order for a lineage to be alive, there are three things that are necessary to be transmitted. Okay. First is knowledge. So, I received the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, or for example, these last days I was explaining the 7 points mind training. I explained in the same way how I received these teachings. Adapting to the way of explaining is different here as where I explained, because different context and so on, but the meaning is the same as I have received. It was interesting, my father was reading one commentary on the 7 points mind training by a great master called Geshe Losang Tarchen, that comes exactly from the same lineage as ours, and he was the disciple of Trijang Rinpoche. And the commentary, which was a transcription of his teachings about the 7 point mind trainings, were exactly the same meanings and the same explanation as we were explaining here. Maybe some small difference here and there, but it was exactly the same thing. So this means what? I transmit in the same way of what I have received. I'm going to explain the same things that I have received because for me they make sense, they are obvious, but there is a system that I have received and I am transmitting that system. That's why we are part of the same tradition. Okay? So one thing which is necessary in a lineage is there to be the transmission of knowledge. It's not that I invent 3 noble truths. No, there are 4. Okay? So we pass one by one, what is bodhicitta, whatever. There is a passage of knowledge. This we call lungi chokor in Tibetan, which is the oral transmission. Then there is a tokpe chokor, which is the dharma wheel, turning the dharma wheel of realization, which is the transmission of experience, which means from one master to the other, there must be experience. Not only in order for me to transmit something, I must minimum believe in what I am transmitting. Possibly I need to put it into practice, and the best way is I need to have realized it. There is a tremendous big difference when we receive something from someone that don't have the experience or someone that have the experience about that. Otherwise, it's just conceptual knowledge which is being passed, but it must have direct experience in order to be transmitted. So we have knowledge, experience, or realizations. And the third point, which is fundamental also, is that I receive the lineage from someone that has a pure relationship of faith, of gratitude, of love with one's own guru. So which means Kanche Rinpoche have a perfect relationship, pure relationship to his guru, Trijang Rinpoche. Trijang Rinpoche had a pure relation to his guru, Kyabche Paponka Rinpoche, and like this we can go on. So when happens that a lineage is interrupted, it breaks. When between two people, 2 generations, one generation loses knowledge, loses experience, or loses faith and connection. So knowledge can be passed, experience can be passed, but if at one point someone breaks the deep relationship with his own gurus, not losing faith or losing respect or losing gratitude or losing love and so on, then the lineage is broken. I can have all the knowledge and I can pass all the knowledge. I can have all the experience about things and I can try to pass my own experience. But if I broke with my own gurus, losing my faith, losing my commitments, losing my connection with love and gratitude and so on, then I have nothing more to pass. It's like I turn down the light pole. Electricity will not pass anymore. So, what is said very clearly, in many teachings, it's said, any teachings that you receive from any tradition, it must come from an uninterrupted lineage. And an interrupted lineage means knowledge, experience, and connection. These three things must be passed from master to disciple. Very luckily we have all this. Just one thing to conclude is that we come from the Gelugpa tradition, which means we follow the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa. We follow the system of teachings that Lama Tsongkhapa has given. Then these teachings, they themselves have been adapted a little bit on time, but especially in the time in which we live, that is so different. So if we take, for instance, three great masters from our same lineage, Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, Kyabche Gonsa Rinpoche, or Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, just to take three names. All the three disciples of Kyabche Trijang Rinpoche. Okay? All of them adapting the teachings, the same teachings, but adapting them in a little different way, because they are in different contexts, having different approaches. And this is so beautiful that we can have this connection nowadays and we can see all of that. So, but exactly the same lineage, okay, and all of them keeping their own lineage purely. When we talk about our lineage that is called the Ganden Nyengyu means the whispered lineage of Ganden. Nyen means listening. Gyu means lineage, transmission. And Ganden means from Lama Tsongkhapa, okay? Or sometimes it's called NgalSo Nyengyu. Basically, it means that it's the name of this lineage, which starts from Lama Tsongkhapa. It's not the same as Gelug. Inside Gelugpa, there is basically for the Tantra two main lineages, which is the lineage going from Gyawa and Sapa, which is called the NgalSo Nyengyu, and the other one is the one going through the monastery of Sergyu, okay, which was through, what's the name of this? Name of this other master was, no, I forgot his name, anyhow. So we have these two main lineages, okay? That's the main difference. For example, the Guru Yoga of Lama Tsongkhapa, Gandela Gema, is coming from the lineage of Sergyu. Is the Guru Yoga as done in accordance to the lineage of Sergyu. The Guru Puja is done in accordance with the lineage of Gyawa and Sapa. Okay? This is just one very specific thing. So normally we receive the teachings from both lineages, but our teachings mainly follow this lineage. So actually when we talk about Ganden Nyengyu, we are talking about the lineage of transmission coming through Paponka Rinpoche mainly. Okay, so basically we are saying, okay, we are following the Gelugpa tradition, but which is our line of transmission? Okay, it's the line of transmission that came in our most nearby from Paponka Rinpoche to Trijang Rinpoche then to us, making it simple. That's the Ganden Nyengyu. Okay, that's why our lineage, our tradition, we would call our lineage, is called NgalSo Ganden Nyengyu, which means NgalSo refers to the teachings which were given by Rinpoche, by Ganchen Rinpoche, which he received from which system? From the system which came from Trijang Rinpoche and Paponka Rinpoche. So this is why we call NgalSo Ganden Nyengyu, which is a little difference within it. Okay? Normally the names of traditions and lineages, sometimes there is a little mixture between the two. But let's just make one example. I receive all the teachings from Lama Ganchen Rinpoche. Lama Caroline received all the teachings from Lama Ganchen Rinpoche. Let's imagine that it happens, I hope not, but let's imagine it happens one time, I go to live in one part of the world, she goes to live in another part of the world, and whatever communications are not there, whatever happened. I give one line of transmission, I have my disciple, she has her disciple, let's say it goes in a way. Naturally, what would happen gradually? In time, we will have two lineages, no? Of the same teachings. And then this is not natural that happen. I will transmit in a way, she will transmit in a way which is a bit different. And this is normal that we'll have different lineages. And people can receive both lineages, or people get sometimes slowly lineages can go down and we can have different lines of transmission of the same tradition. Okay? So when we call about Ganden Nyengyu, it has many meanings, but now it's too long. Maybe the next teachings I can talk more about this. But one of the meanings of Nyengyu, which is the whispered or the verbal lineage, which is Nyen means listening, no? Which Gyu means transmitted through the oral lineage, which means the main part of the lineage, it's not something that is written. It's something that must be transmitted with direct experience. So what is truly transmitted in a non-written way is the deep connection of love that is created by master and disciple. This is the real connection. This is the real thing that is transmitted from Lama Tsongkhapa arriving to us. That's the main aspect when we call about our whispered lineage or our oral lineage. There are teachings that it's not something that is necessarily written, but it's mainly transmitted through experience and in a way that is not experienced, transmitted by a written way. Okay, it's not something that you can just read a book. That's not enough. Okay. Anyhow, so this is a little bit the concept of lineage. And just to conclude, it's fundamentally important to have a lineage. And it's very important for us just to remember we should follow our lineage and we should follow our tradition in the best way, because that's the one we are connected to. But this doesn't mean that other lineages and other traditions are not good enough or any other thing. We should be extremely respectful to each and every tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa himself, his gurus, were from which tradition? Nyingma, Kagyu, and Sakya, mostly. Because that were the traditions that were. Lama Tsongkhapa had so many teachers, So, if anybody would say, oh, these traditions are not valid, which would mean the traditions from which Lama Tsongkhapa himself received the teachings were not valid then, So, we need actually to respect deeply every tradition and respect deeply every lineage. As Atisha would say in the Jewel Garland of the Bodhisattva, respect every spiritual tradition and follow the one you choose with dedication. So that's what I think is important. Each teaching, each tradition have a own system that is coherent within, that is consistent within itself. Okay? That's why if we mix too much, also sometimes it doesn't work, most of the times, because I take one part from here, another part from there, another part from there, and then what happens, it doesn't fit everything well, because each system have their own part of beginning, middle, and end. It has a whole consistent way within it. That's why it's important for us to follow one system and not mix too much things together. But this doesn't mean that one is better than the other and we should not respect each other the other way around. There should be a deep, great respect between every tradition and every lineage. Okay? So just concluding. Conclusion is that we are very fortunate because we received these teachings from within an uninterrupted lineage. And that's valid uninterrupted lineage. And this is something that we are very fortunate to have all of that. Okay. Jetsun lame kotse rapten che namkar chenle chochur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasomgi drove muse tatu ne gyur che nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shing Nyinsen takto delek pe koncho sumke jingi lop, koncho sumke ngodrup tsol, koncho sumke trashishu. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.